6 months after Japan successfully attacked the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Japanese Navy Commander Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto planned another offensive against Midway Island, a small American military outpost in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. However, the Battle of Midway would become one of Japan's most devastating defeats, eventually pushing the country toward the desperate Kamikaze suicide attack strategy. Japan's objective in attacking Midway was not simply to capture the island itself. Instead, they intended to use it as bait to lure out the remaining American aircraft carriers that had survived the attack on Pearl Harbor and destroy them once and for all. If the United States lost its aircraft carriers, Japan would gain complete control of the Pacific Ocean. However, the United States had already managed to partially crack Japan's secret naval codes after the Pearl Harbor attack. This breakthrough became a crucial advantage before the Battle of Midway. By May 1942, American codebreakers stationed in Hawaii were able to intercept and read many Japanese military communications. They discovered that Japan was preparing to attack a target identified only by the code name AF. To confirm that AF referred to Midway Island, the Americans devised a clever deception. They instructed the radio station on Midway to send an uncoded message, falsely reporting that the island's freshwater system had broken down. 2 days later, American intelligence intercepted a Japanese coded message sent to Tokyo stating that AF was suffering from a shortage of fresh water. This confirmed beyond doubt that Midway was the intended target. With this knowledge, the United States prepared an ambush for the approaching Japanese fleet. On June 4, 1942, after learning of Japan's plans in advance, American Commander Admiral Chester W. Nimitz secretly positioned 3 aircraft carriers near Midway to intercept the Japanese Navy. That morning, Japanese aircraft launched bombing raids on Midway exactly as planned. When those planes returned, Japanese commanders ordered their aircraft to be rearmed, switching from land bombs to torpedoes for naval combat. As a result, the Japanese carriers were left crowded with bombs, fuel, and ammunition scattered across their decks. At approximately 10:25 a.m., American dive bombers suddenly attacked while the Japanese carriers were in complete confusion and poorly defended. American bombs struck their targets directly, triggering massive explosions and uncontrollable fires. Within minutes, 3 of Japan's major aircraft carriers were destroyed, while a 4th carrier was sunk later that same evening. The American counterattack resulted in the loss of all 4 of Japan's large aircraft carriers, along with 1 cruiser, around 250 aircraft, and more than 3,000 soldiers. Japan's greatest loss, however, was the destruction of many of its most experienced and highly trained pilots who could not be quickly replaced. The crushing defeat at Midway shattered the core strength of the Japanese Navy. From that moment onward, Japan no longer had the capability to launch large-scale offensives and was forced into a defensive position, while the United States seized the initiative and began pushing Japanese forces back island by island until the end of the war. As Japan continued to suffer heavy defeats across the Pacific, it turned increasingly toward the kamikaze strategy, suicide attacks in which Japanese pilots deliberately crashed their aircraft into American ships. The word kamikaze means divine wind. The name originated from historical events in the 13th century during the Mongol invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281. According to Japanese history, powerful typhoons destroyed much of the Mongol invasion fleet and saved Japan from conquest. The Japanese people believed these storms were divine protection sent by the gods. Centuries later, during World War II, Japan revived the term as a symbol of sacrifice in defense of the nation. By late 1944, Japan's military situation in the Pacific had become desperate. The country had lost large numbers of aircraft and highly skilled pilots, while Japanese planes were becoming outdated compared to newer American fighters. To counter the overwhelming strength of the U.S. Navy, Japanese Commander Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi believed that deliberate suicide attacks would be more effective than conventional bombing missions. Because of this idea, he became known as the father of the Kamikaze strategy. The Kamikaze campaign officially began in October 1944 during the Battle of Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. On October 25, 1944, a group of pilots led by Lieutenant Yukio Seki successfully sank the American escort carrier USS St. Lo, marking the first major success of the strategy. Most kamikaze pilots were very young men between the ages of 17 and 24. They were taught to embrace courage and to believe that dying for the emperor and their country was the highest honor. Before departure, many participated in ceremonial sake drinking rituals and wore headbands marked with the rising sun symbol. Japan also developed a terrifying suicide weapon called the Oka, meaning cherry blossom. Unlike ordinary aircraft, the Oka was essentially a manned missile. Instead of using a propeller engine, it was powered by 3 rockets mounted at the rear, allowing it to dive at speeds approaching 650 kilometers per hour. Its nose carried an explosive warhead weighing up to 1,200 kilograms, powerful enough to severely damage or destroy large warships. The Oka was not designed to land safely and had no landing gear. Because it was small and carried limited fuel, it could not take off independently. Instead, it was attached beneath a larger bomber aircraft, usually the Mitsubishi G4M, known by the Allies as the Betty. Once near enemy ships, the Oka pilot would enter the craft, and the bomber would release it toward the target. The pilot would then ignite the rocket engines and guide the missile directly into enemy ships at extremely high speeds, making interception very difficult. Because of the brutal nature of the Oka attacks, American soldiers nicknamed the weapon Baka, a Japanese word meaning fool or crazy. They considered the idea of designing a weapon that guaranteed the pilot's death to be both horrifying and irrational. Approximately 3,800 kamikaze aircraft were used during the war. These attacks sank between 30 and 50 Allied ships and damaged hundreds more. Around 7,000 American and Allied sailors were killed as a result of kamikaze strikes. To defend against these suicide attacks, the United States implemented a layered defense strategy known as the Big Blue Blanket. This system combined radar detection, constant fighter patrols, and anti-aircraft fire. American destroyers were deployed roughly 80 kilometers from the main fleet to serve as radar picket ships, providing early warnings whenever Japanese aircraft approached. Once enemy planes were detected, American fighter aircraft were launched to intercept and destroy kamikaze pilots before they could reach their targets. U.S. fighters patrolled continuously around the fleet, 24 hours a day. If any kamikaze aircraft managed to break through, they still faced intense anti-aircraft defenses equipped with VT proximity fuses, advanced shells that automatically exploded near enemy aircraft using miniature radar technology. Despite these powerful defenses, kamikaze attacks still managed to inflict damage on American forces. However, the strategy ultimately failed to change the outcome of the war. Instead, it led to the deaths of thousands of young Japanese pilots who never returned home. Before departing on their final missions, many kamikaze pilots wrote farewell letters to their families. These letters later became some of the most emotional documents of World War II, revealing the heartbreaking conflict between duty to their nation and love for their families. Although the world often viewed them as fanatics, these letters show that most of the pilots were simply ordinary young men who loved life and cared deeply for their families. Many apologized to their parents for not being able to care for them longer and thanked them for raising them. Some wrote that they felt calm and prepared to die, comparing themselves to falling cherry blossoms, symbols of beauty and the shortness of life in Japanese culture. One pilot wrote, "When the cherry blossoms bloom next spring, please think of me as returning home to visit you again." Others wrote messages such as, "I am fortunate to have been born as your son. I will fly into the blue sky and destroy the enemy. Please do not cry. Even if I die, my spirit will always remain beside you." Some private diaries, which were not made public during the war, revealed a darker truth. Many pilots admitted they were terrified and did not want to die. But because of social pressure, family honor, and strict military discipline, they felt they had no choice but to board the aircraft. After the war ended, Japan established the Chiran Peace Museum to preserve the letters and photographs of kamikaze pilots, reminding future generations of the painful lessons and tragic human cost of war.